Look, I do have my reservations about Israeli strategy. On one hand, I've seen them adapt quite well, and on the other, I don't think they've really thought through the second and third order effects. Even if you adapt tactically, you might not adapt strategically. Let me give you an example of what I mean. The thing that sticks in my memory is the first, because I remember it vividly about, what was it, 20 or so, but more than 20 years back, which was the first Russian invasion of Chechnya. And you can't really say invasion because Chechnya is a part of Russia, but the siege of Grozny. And what the Russians did was that they flattened Grozny with shelling and aerial bombardment. The problem was it created a whole new network through the rubble, through which Chechen rebels were able to completely decimate Russian armored formations going in. Right. Now, as a response to that, Russia developed active protection systems, which is basically there are radars on all four sides of the tank. And the moment it detects a missile or a projectile coming in, it kind of releases a sort of bullet to hit a bullet kind of thing, which stops that thing from hitting the tank. Obviously, in an urban environment, the reaction times are very short. In the field, you can detect the missile, those radars on all four sides, because it's a completely staring array. You get 360-degree radar vision, is able to detect the missile from very far and deploy these countermeasures. In an urban area where the missile would be fired from maybe 10-15 meters away, the reaction time would be like that. Can that be achieved? We don't know. Do the Israelis have the technology? Yes. But something new has been introduced, which is these little commercial drones, which most of us use for photography, which are now being used to drop these little grenade type things, which are very effective against tanks, by the way, on the roof. Now, if you look, the way a tank works is that the front armor is the thickest. Now, this would be normal armor. But if I slant this, and this is why the fronts of tanks are always slanted, without any increase in weight, the thickness of penetration has become almost three times the size. If the armor was straight, it was just this much. But just by slanting it, the projectile now has to go almost three times the thickness, right? So what ends up happening is uh, tanks on all their sides are fairly well protected. On the top, they are not. And what these new commercial drone tactics that we've seen in Ukraine are doing is that they are utilizing that weakness to drop things on tanks. Even this, the Israelis have adapted to. They have started putting these little, cages almost on top, and what happens is, even before the projectile can be dropped, it explodes on the cage. And so it's not very sophisticated technology. It's a kind of window grills or bars that you put on your windows or whatever if you're in a high crime area kind of thing. And it actually very effectively stops these grenades from actually hitting the armor. Now, brilliant tactical innovation so far, done very rapidly so far. The problem is, once they go into Gaza, do they have the same tactics? Have they got the tactics thought out? I don't think so. What happens after you have gone in? One of the things I think is very easy to do. Now, there are three ways of dealing. Hamas lives in these underground cities. There is an entire underground city under Gaza. There is an underground city under Khan Yunis. There is probably more tunnels in Gaza than there are rat holes in Delhi and rat nests in Delhi. Uh, it is a whole city. I have actually been to the northern border with Lebanon and looked at ground penetrating radar images. What looks like a very, sort of unoffensive little village on the hill on the Lebanese side of the border. You look at it through a ground penetrating radar, and it's almost like an iceberg where 9/10 of it is actually underground. And there's a whole city underground of tunnels. It's a whole hive of tunnels underground, right? And which is, it's a city. What's on top is a village, what's underground is a city with concentrations of ammunition, etc., etc., etc. Now, I think one of the very easy things, there are three ways of getting rid of this. One is the high technology and what I believe a very stupid way of going about things, which is, sending these rover kind of bots into this with cameras where you're constantly tracking them and go after people individually. The second is, remember, these things, the deeper they go, they require ventilation, they require cooling, they require all kinds of ground support infrastructure to be pumped down to them. And what ends up happening is that you can cut off the ventilation shafts, you can cut off the cooling shafts, you can cut off the air pumps and essentially asphyxiate them down there. The problem is, how many of those will you go after? Do you even know where all the air vents are? Do you know where all the ventilation shafts are? Do you know where the pumps, etc., are? You probably won't. The third is probably the easiest thing to do, which is to pump a whole load of water into those tunnels and just keep that water there for about a month or 2 months. Because no matter how well stocked you are going to run out of oxygen ultimately. And no amount of ventilation is going to be able to save you when your entire tunnel system is flooded. Now, I don't know which one of these solutions the Israelis are going to use, but they're definitely going to be using a combination. I think the third one is the most effective. But then again, where I don't think the Israelis have thought through is they've thought through what's going to happen today and tomorrow. They haven't thought through what's going to happen day after tomorrow and the week after that and the month after that. So assume you've gotten all the tunnels, and over a 6-month campaign, you've individually vetted every single Gazan and killed or arrested all the Hamas linked ones. Because remember, Hamas has anywhere between 35 to 50,000 troops in Gaza. And mind you, most of these troops are kids. 44% of Gaza is under 14 years of age. And they have all been bred very specifically to be human shields. Hamas encourages having more kids so that they can become human shields, and so that the lack of prospects leads to rage, which leads to radicalization, which fills their ranks. These people abuse their own people a lot more than anybody else abuses them. Everybody forgets that the Germans were the first and the worst victims of Nazi Germany. Everybody forgets that the Chinese were the first and the worst victims of the Communist Party of China. Everybody seems to forget, including, unfortunately, the Palestinians themselves, that the Gazans are the first and the worst victims of Hamas and Palestinian international jihad themselves. Okay? So, I mean, I don't know what it is, Stockholm Syndrome or call it what you will, but that is the reality of what is happening in here. But then what? You've gotten rid of Hamas as much as you can. Hamas's leadership is in Turkey, it is in Doha, in Qatar, and there is help coming from Iran. What are you going to do about that? We don't want this to become a situation like Afghanistan, where the Americans went on attacking the symptom, which was the Taliban, but not the cause, which was ISI headquarters in Rawalpindi, right? Pakistan intelligence headquarters in Rawalpindi, which was directing the entire Taliban campaign against the allies. And ultimately, after 20 years, they had to leave. And remember, the Israelis don't have a good track record on this. They went into South Lebanon. It was a 20-year occupation of South Lebanon. It achieved nothing in the end. Are they able to think through things? I am not too sure, because it is rage fueled at the moment. I don't think they're thinking through what comes next. We have heard very vague statements that we will create a government that is going to be civilian, free from Hamas control. But see, if you create a civilian government free from Hamas control, how are you going to deprogram the last 20 to 25 years of severe radicalization that has happened? The socioeconomic factors like a high youth bulge combined with high unemployment for which there is no solution, and that feeding radicalization and the recreation of Hamas, and an international Hamas leadership that's just waiting to utilize that radicalization to rebuild the organization. I don't think any of these things have been thought through. Neither has a general escalation happening. So, for example, what if Hezbollah gets involved? I think people don't realize that Hezbollah has something like almost 500,000 rockets in storage in Lebanon. That is more, and the amount of accuracy we've seen with these rockets, it keeps increasing with every iteration. Before, out of every 100 rockets, maybe only 2 rockets used to fall in urban concentrations because they were unguided. Increasingly, we're seeing rudimentarily guided, but at least about 10 to 15% of them are falling in urban areas. They are no longer falling in unpopulated areas. And 10 to 15% of 500,000 is still a few 100,000 rockets. Well, not a few 100,000, but it's still several tens of thousands of rockets. And Israel doesn't have counters to that. So you're going to see a lot of uh, very significant losses. And then what happens? Does an invasion of Lebanon and southern Syria happen? And what is Iran going to do sitting by while it watches its proxy out there, Hezbollah, get destroyed? It's not going to sit by and allow its most potent external asset to get destroyed. Will it do what Saddam Hussein did in 1990, which is fire long range missiles at Tel Aviv? I personally think that is what the Iranians will do. And they will use an Israeli conventional retaliation against Iran. They will claim that this is humanitarian intervention to prevent massacre. And when Israel hits back, they will claim it is aggression and detonate a nuclear device and declare themselves a nuclear power. I think a lot of this gambit has been done so that Iran can actually declare itself a nuclear power and detonate a nuclear device.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.